Chicago Avenue to the Burns Circle. It's 27 minutes, O'Hare to downtown. Outbound 21. Inbound Eisenhower. Delays kicking around Racine. It's 30 minutes, 390 to downtown. Stevenson, 30 minutes, 355 to Lakeshore Drive. Inbound Ryan, a crash at 69th Street is gone. 19 minutes, 95 to downtown. Bishop Ford, 16 minutes from 8094 to the Merge. That's traffic. I'm Chip Talamonte. On AM 560, The Answer.
Chicago's Morning Answer continues next. Your official Chicagoland weather forecast. Clouds and sunshine, high near 30 today. 23 right now. Next news at 8. Breaking news as it happens. Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan and Amy continues next on AM 560, The Answer.
From the Matrix Home Solutions studios, this is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560, The Answer.
Listen to AM 560, The Answer, online at 560theanswer.com, on the AM 560 mobile app, on your Alexa-powered smart speaker, on TuneIn, iHeart, and radio.com. When you've got questions, he always has an answer. It's Sean Hannity, this afternoon at 2 on AM 560, The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. Let's talk a little bit about the future of money and financial transactions in the digital age. We talked a bit on Friday with Scott the Cow Guy Shalady about Bitcoin after it ran up to north of $40,000 a coin. It's now receded back to a little under $34,000, but it's generating a lot of interest, as it has for really many years, more pronounced as you've seen the skyrocketing price. And our next guest is somebody that is an unabashed crypto enthusiast, proponent, and somebody that I wish I would have listened to about, a year and a half ago when Bitcoin was at like
$40,000 ago.
But it's still a little bit unclear to me. This is not without issues to traverse, and so to help us traverse them, we're joined by the Sausage King of Chicago's offspring. He is Abe Froman Jr., or at least that's the name he's allowing us to use to have him on the program. Abe, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Glad to be here.
So here is one perspective on the recent run-up, what was driving the recent run-up in price. The idea, based on the possibility that major corporations would start adding Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies to their balance sheets. And if that is a fair read, ultimately those big corporate players are going to want institutionalized mainstream crypto assets. They're not going to mind heavily regulated crypto assets, crypto-linked financial institutions. And so isn't this the challenge of crypto assets, staying sort of fringe, but while getting mainstream? And if once they go mainstream, doesn't the scarcity and thus the price change?
Yes, and when I speak most about crypto, I'm what most people would call a Bitcoin maximalist, and that's maybe 90% true. Other stuff is interesting, but really, in my world, in my worldview, Bitcoin is really the king of the cryptocurrencies, and it's obviously being supported by its price rise. But probably the biggest news of 2020 was when Michael Saylor took MicroStrategy's public. They were a publicly traded company, but he went public with the information that they went ahead and bought. I think it was $250 million worth of Bitcoin when it was, they started accumulating it early in May and June when it was about $9,000. But he later then disclosed that he put another $250 million of his own money into it also. But at the end of the day, that was a absolutely, I think people are going to look back in history and see that as being a bit of a wake-up call to anybody who's in charge of corporate treasuries, that they need to diversify their asset class out of the dollar and hedge a little bit into the world of Bitcoin. And what attracted me to Bitcoin when I first learned about it back in 2014, and I'm totally self-educated on the topic, just for the record, but is literally the way that the code restricts supply. no other cryptocurrency has the strict supply limitations that Bitcoin has. Even if a cryptocurrency claims that it has the ability to restrict the supply, they're still run by humans and groups of humans, small groups of humans that can go ahead and make decisions to go ahead and change that coin supply whenever they want. So Bitcoin doesn't have that. There is no CEO of Bitcoin. There is no corporate headquarters. There's no place for the SEC to go drag somebody in front of, or congressional hearings, dragging people in front of it and browbeating them in front of cameras for political points. So that is what Bitcoin is.
So then what is that's the four corners of Bitcoin's value as a store of value like gold is, and that's it? Or is there functionality or use in financial transactions that provides more attractiveness than just as a store of value?
Absolutely. I mean, the store of value is kind of the current thing. And, the other thing, too, to consider about Bitcoin is whatever the thing is that people are talking about today is going to be a different thing 6 months from now and 12 months from now and 18 months from now. And that's part of the fun of Bitcoin itself, is the fact that the commentary is constantly evolving. So, I mean, ultimately, the reason I kind of stopped doing public speaking or, kind of seminars, so to speak, is that the only reason people were there is to find out how can I make more money with Bitcoin. And when I mean money, I'm talking US dollars. And I kind of became a bit of a cynic because that was all people wanted to talk about was the price of Bitcoin. I said, there's a lot more interesting stuff that is happening that is going to be built on top of Bitcoin as a financial service, as the internet of money, that's not controlled by governments. Anybody who's been involved in, the banking system as a small business owner, if you get a wire hung up, for 3, 4, 5, 6 days, you have no recourse waiting for the banks to figure out what happened. That doesn't happen in Bitcoin. Bitcoin, you can move value within minutes. You get transaction IDs within seconds, and value transfers settle, within minutes, a half hour, 45 minutes. So
this is an important point, because one of the things you're arguing is even if your wealth is in the physical world, Bitcoin could still have utility in terms of commercial transactions.
Absolutely. So when you think of a Bitcoin, it's just computer code, and that computer code is currently right now programmed to be. You can subdivide it 100 million ways. So inside of a Bitcoin is 100 million pieces of code that can be coded upon. So in the future, you can think of building financial services where a single Bitcoin could run 100 million contracts. A single Bitcoin could run 100 million transactions. So when you start thinking about how infinitely divisible Bitcoin is and what it can do in the future, paying your mortgage once every 30 seconds instead of once every 30 days, what does that do to your APR? What if you could pay for your car insurance by the second that your car was actually started and moving? Everything that we do with money today will be done, on the Bitcoin rails in the future. And, this is just the beginning of it. I mean, we sit here and we can't quite understand.
Well, one of the other things then would be, I mean, I think for people who are novices in terms of its utility, speak to the security. So you're talking about, anonymity to the outside world with your Bitcoin holdings. And then if I'm going to do any of the commercial transactions or payments that you just described, how can I trust the security of this vehicle to do the transaction?
Well, I think the thing that speaks most volume, or the greatest volume to the security of Bitcoin, is the fact that the creator of Bitcoin has just short of 1 million coins wrapped up in his wallet and is publicly available. And when he put those there, it was essentially a bounty, a dare for anybody to go ahead and try to get access to them, to try to steal them. And that is essentially the long and short story of how you can prove the security of Bitcoin, because if Bitcoin wasn't secure, it's been 12 years and those coins haven't been touched or haven't moved. But the deeper answer to that is a 2-hour conversation.
Abe, what about how Bitcoin's being received around the world, in China, the UK?
Well, from what I can gather is that the Chinese, first of all, there's a lot of people that would be happy to, replace the dollar as the world's reserve currency. And I certainly don't understand what the implications of that would be in the future. But, people, there are plenty of people out there that are excited about trying to figure out how does this change the future. And it will change it. I just don't know what that's going to look like. So, yeah, outside the United States, people love Bitcoin. And that's where all the fun conversations really happen. Unfortunately, in the United States, I say the bankers and the financial people in the financial industry suffer from battered regulator syndrome, where as soon as you bring up something interesting, the first thing they do is how can we not do this? And it's sad.
With respect to the other cryptocurrencies, maybe I don't have 30 grand or even a lot of money that I want to devote to exploring cryptocurrency, but Ethereum and Litecoin and all of these other cryptocurrencies, how do you start to make sense of one crypto versus another, and what makes sense in terms of dipping your toe in the cryptocurrency water, if you will?
Well, I guess my advice would be just start with Bitcoin, and then use that entry into the Bitcoin world to basically figure out why Bitcoin is different than everything else. And then by that point, then you can figure out, well, why is everything else different, and which ones, which ones do you see as having more value? It's a complicated question to answer, but and the other thing too is you don't need $30,000 to buy Bitcoin. You could buy $10 worth of Bitcoin if you want, because again, you can subdivide it into 100 million parts. So, that's what I would suggest.
What's the conversations you have with other people in this space? I mean, what are the concerns they raise, or the horizon they're looking at before you have the U.S. government intercede in a more meaningful way than it has to this point? And I don't just mean in the area of tax collection. I mean, a U.S. government does not want a financial system that evolves outside of the purview of the Federal Reserve, the FDIC, and so forth. So you can suspect there's going to be a knock on the door at some point, or an effort to knock on the door. And so what are those conversations like?
Well, so this is one of the hard things that, once you get involved in Bitcoin and really studying it, is understanding what does borderless really mean. You hear people say, well, Bitcoin is borderless. And the fact is that it's borderless. It doesn't answer to any government. It can't. It's impossible. The code wouldn't understand any direction from any outside authority. So now, could the U.S. government come in and start beating up companies that deal in Bitcoin? Sure, they could do that. But that's just going to drive the utility, outside the United States. And from what it seems like, and, I do have contact with the Treasury Department on a lot of these topics in terms of, what individual people within those departments think. And at the end of the day, I think everybody's realizing at that level that the genie's out of the bottle, and there's really nothing you can do to stop it. It's just learning about how to educate yourself and then go from there.
You mentioned you're self-taught. I mean, for people listening who want to do some self-education, any recommendations in terms of places to start, resources to access?
Probably the best place that I went to, and this kind of probably sounds like a cop-out answer, but it's true, is just YouTube. By going to YouTube, and the one thing I would say about a couple things about consuming content on YouTube when it comes to Bitcoin is, one, look at the older content to get your basis of education, like anything from 2015 and earlier, because that's when Bitcoin was just an idea, was just kind of a thing. A lot of times people get wrapped up in current videos. So if you want to learn about the technology, look at the old stuff. But also, I also encourage people to consume as much negative Bitcoin news out there, because what I found was the more haters that I ran into on, YouTube or even in blogs, the more I realized that their arguments were all the exact same. And the people that were on the other side saying, hey, wait a minute, have you considered this? Have you considered that? Were much more, more appealing arguments to the case.
He is Abe Froman Jr., his alias. Must be a big Ferris Bueller's Day Off fan.
Yeah.
He's also the Director of Operations at Digital Asset Redemption. Abe, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate your insights.
I will say one thing. If you're going to jump on YouTube, look up Andreas Antonopoulos. He is the guru, the professor of Bitcoin on YouTube.
All right, thanks.
Andreas Antonopoulos. All right, thank you, sir.
And Abe joined us in our Matrix Home Solutions studio.
This is Chicago's Morning Answer.
Your show keeps me alive during the week. There's nobody I'd rather listen to between 5 and 9 in the morning than you guys.
On AM 560, The Answer.
Here's a fact. Too much of today's journalism is liberal and politically biased. So where should you turn to get accurate, leading-edge information that you can trust? The Epoch Times. The Epoch Times covers the news the way you need it, unfiltered and accurate. Cutting-edge topics like the danger of the Chinese Communist Party, the truth about the presidential election, the pandemic, Russia, the Middle East, the economy, and news you won't hear anywhere else. The Epoch Times is free from the influence of governments, corporations, or political parties. You get to form your own opinions. Here's a special introductory offer. You can get 1-month subscription to the Epoch Times weekly print newspaper, as well as unlimited access to their dynamic website for just $1. That's right, $1. Go right now to readepoch.com. That's readepoch, EPOCH.com to subscribe. Do it now. readepoch.com.
Since 1979, Permaseal Basement Systems has been creating dry basements and stable foundations for Chicagoland and Northwest Indiana homeowners. Hi, I'm Roy Spencer, president of Permaseal. Over 400,000 homeowners have trusted our team to provide them the peace of mind that comes with a dry basement and crawl space and a structurally sound foundation, and so can you. We're celebrating our 42nd anniversary by giving the gift of savings. From now until the end of January, you can receive 10% off up to $500 or pay over 24 months with zero interest charges. Whether it's waterproofing, backup pumps, crawl space encapsulation, concrete